Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. This is the Slate Tuesday, November 2nd. We have a 5-game slate in the NBA tonight. We're talking lots of hoops up until 6 o'clock. We will also dabble into the NFL. Week 9 starting up on Thursday when the Jets visit the Colts. Matt Meiselman is back after joining us last night. And welcome in Julian Edlow. He is a DraftKings contributor, also one of the co-hosts of the Unreasonable Odds podcast that we have at DraftKings. Julian, it's great to have you with us tonight.
It's great to be here, Glash. As you know, I'm very busy and my time is tough to come by.
There it is.
But the holidays are approaching and I wanted to share some of my time with you because I know that's the best gift that I can give you.
That's great. Well, maybe you're also picking up some extra shifts and helping us out here because it is the holiday season, but you're also in a giving mood because I did see you posted on the DK playbook today some leans, not some plays, unless that's changed in the last couple of hours. We can certainly dive into what Julian's feeling on the NBA slate tonight. Meiselman, what's your first thought? We have a 5-game slate, lots of injuries to get to as well, particularly the Milwaukee Bucks, but what else stands out to you?
Yeah, there are a couple late injuries tonight that we may not get news on for a while that I think are going to fly under the radar. So I'm ready to dive into those, like 10:30 games. People may forget about them by the time that we actually get announcements. So I think there's some interesting situations for both DFS and sports betting.
All right, well, please dive in. What's the number one thought?
All right, let's do it. So DeAndre Ayton is questionable. We can kind of start there. And he came back in. So I think he got hurt in the first half last game home for the Suns against the Cavs a couple nights ago. And he came back in to start the second half, but actually didn't play the fourth quarter. He played 8 minutes in the third. JaVale McGee came in. The Suns got up by a decent amount, but they played the rest of their starters in the fourth. Chris Paul played, Devin Booker played, but Ayton didn't play in the fourth quarter. So there's at least a chance that he doesn't play tonight. The Suns are also on the front end of a back-to-back. They're playing the Warriors tomorrow. This is just the Pelicans. So it kind of just adds up for him not to play. And I think that would open up a ton of value for JaVale McGee, who could play 25, 30 minutes and probably would be something like a 9 or 10x projection for close to min price. But if we get that news late, people may not play him. So for DFS, I think that's interesting. And then for sports betting, like to me, DeAndre Ayton, and I've been saying this since last year, is the most valuable player on the Suns. I think you could argue he's their best player, but even if he's not, Chris Paul and Devin Booker have each other to pick up the slack when either of them doesn't play. Ayton doesn't, I think JaVale McGee is fine, but Ayton is so important to that team, especially defensively. Without him, I think they really lose a lot. So even though the Pelicans don't have Zion Williamson, they don't have Brandon Ingram, I would still love their side of the game at plus 11.5 if DeAndre Ayton's not playing. I just don't think the Suns are a good team without Ayton. They don't have Cameron Payne either. They've been struggling a little this year. I think that's part of the reason why. So 11.5, whatever it is, if Ayton is not in and it's contingent on that, I think the Pelicans are probably undervalued by 3 or 4 points there. So there's ramifications here for both betting and DFS.
What about Brandon Ingram, though, being doubtful tonight for New Orleans?
Yeah, I think they can make up for it a bit. They have Josh Hart back, which is not the most exciting player in the world, but he's good enough where that depth does matter. Devontae Graham was also questionable this morning. He's probable now.
Yep.
So that helps too. And they have Jonas Valanciunas, who's really good. And that's going to be a matchup nightmare for the Suns if they don't have Ayton. So all of this is dependent on Ayton. I don't really like this game at all if he's in, but if he's out, Joe Bell could do really well here. So I'm not Ingram's good, but he's not a great player yet. And it's a big deal when he doesn't play, but Zion's a bigger deal. And it's just if you imagine what this game would look like if both these teams were healthy, I think we'd see a 4 or 5 point spread. The Pelicans have a lot of talent. They're just, they're missing a lot of guys. But I think basically what's happening here is the line is overcorrecting for how bad they've been so far.
Julian, you have a thought on this game? It's sitting at 11 points right now, going to New Orleans. The over-under at 214.5. Suns hosting the Pelicans.
Yeah, so, and I'm just right now actually tweeting out the updated NBA betting splits that DraftKings Sportsbook gave me. So those, if you're looking for them, are just going up on Twitter right now. And let me see, we've got, I think it was 70. So big bets on the Suns. 40. I mean, the bets, the tickets are basically even. 51% Pelicans, 49% Suns, but 71% of that money is on the Suns, 29% on the Pelicans. So the big bets are coming in on the Suns. And yeah, if this winds up being no Ayton, I think those are going to be a lot of unhappy bettors, because at the bare minimum, you at least just got a worse number. We know that that line is going to move the other way. But yeah, all these late games, like you look at the late window, they're all roughly double-digit spreads or in the neighborhood, huge home favorites. If anything can change, like Matt said, in those late games, and maybe it's something unexpected because that happens all the time, just like Tobias Harris last night. I know we don't want to talk about that game. All of us lost on the Blazers. That was pathetic, but
I thought we said we weren't going to talk about it. What does he do? He brings it up, Meiselman.
Yeah,
we're just going to mention it. We're not going to talk about it, right? That's the plan.
We know that we know what happened. We all know what happened. We're looking at our bankrolls and we know what happened. But stuff like that happens. So like in these late games, that's what I'm looking at for DFS. That's what I'm looking at for being able to snipe a late player prop when somebody unexpectedly gets ruled out. But yeah, it's kind of a lackluster Tuesday NBA slate. You know, in my best bets article, I do have some interest in the Heat Mavericks game, which we can talk about in a little bit. And then that other one, the Milwaukee game, is just like, they're still short road favorites without so many bodies. Is there still some type of player prop value available in that game? Not necessarily the type when we get an unexpected injury and you have to pounce on something, but is anything that's left up on the board still of value on the Milwaukee side in that early game? So that's kind of where my head's at. I have some ideas on the two earlier games. When it gets to the later games, I'm hoping for some, whether it's Ayton or something completely off the wall, to happen, just so that I can react. I don't even care what it is.
Chris Middleton, health and safety protocols. Drew Holiday with the ankle. Brooke Lopez with his back. DiVincenzo ankle. All out tonight for Milwaukee. We can certainly dive in. Also want to get your thoughts, both of you, on Giannis as a DFS play. But Julian, we can certainly dive into the early games as well. I have some thoughts on Lakers and Rockets as well. There's an interesting dynamic there that I feel like doesn't have a lot of attention at this point in the season, because we think like COVID's like over, but it's not, in the sense that the schedule, the way it's built, the Lakers are playing the Rockets at Staples Center for the second straight game in 3 days. And there are some trends there that actually favor the Rockets, even though they are horrendous. But okay, let's go into those early games. Miami and Dallas, as well as Milwaukee. Are you staying away from the Bucks, even though they're short favorites, Julian?
So yeah, they're intriguing as like a money line parlay piece, just because of how bad the Pistons are. The Pistons still only have one win. They haven't looked very good. They've been without different guys at times. But Milwaukee's lost 3 in a row. Like, this just screams kind of stay away spot for me. But man, looking at the -4.5, anytime you get a Bucks Pistons game, you've got to at least think about it. And maybe Matt has some thoughts there one way or the other. But Matt, player prop wise, like, we know all these guys that are out, and yet we still have props hanging. And I haven't bet anything, but the ones that jumped out to me were the Grayson Allen 14.5 points, 2.5 3-pointers made. And the 2.5 3-pointers made is -140. So you got to lay a little juice. But when you look at this, like, Allen's averaging 13.7 points per game. The last game he had 18 with Middleton missing that last game. And let me see. We
got it up right here on the screen share too.
18 points, 14 field goal attempts was his season high, 5 of 10 from downtown. Mm-hmm. He's 23 of 62 from downtown in 7 games. Like, do you think there's something left there, Matt, on Grayson Allen in the player props?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this game.
Okay.
I'll start with Grayson Allen. So the two props I liked last game when Middleton got ruled out were Allen's over. It was only 12.5 there. And then Jordan Nwora's over, which I think was 9. And he was just horrible. So Allen won easily. Nwora, I think he had 2 points. I think part of the reason
he's not on the board, so he can't trick you this time around.
Okay, well that's good news. I think part of the reason Allen got so many minutes is because Nwora just played so terribly. Like, it wasn't just that he was low usage; he was turning the ball over. He just wasn't effective whatsoever. It was a tough matchup against the Jazz. This one's obviously easier, but like, I don't know if Allen can necessarily replicate what he did last game. That being said, like, he can make 3 3-pointers. Like, he doesn't need 5 for you to win. So I think Allen is interesting, but more than that, I think the Pistons are the spot here. The Pistons have 1 win this year. That was the one game that Cade Cunningham played. Cade Cunningham is playing again. So, you know, they're probably better with him. I mean, he opened the season as the favorite for Rookie of the Year. Right now he's 3rd. But the Bucks roster right now,
I would guess really quick. I want to guess this because I haven't looked at it. I would guess he's behind Jalen Green and Scotty Barnes.
Yep. Yeah. And then Mobley is pretty close.
Right behind him. Yep.
Fourth, just
making sure I'm in touch with everything here.
You are the futures tracking guy.
I'm hip.
That's why you have this role. But yeah, like the Bucks, the depth on this team. I mean, the starting lineup is going to have Thanasis Antetokounmpo in it also, who is not really a good basketball player. No, and then they're starting George Hill, Grayson Allen, and Pat Connaughton, who, say what you will about their props, like that is a bench. That's not a starting group. And then their bench has Bobby Portis and then a G League team. Like this is a bad roster, and the Pistons aren't good, and the Pistons don't have Giannis. So like that's obviously the difference between these two teams. But the Pistons have, like, I think part of the reason I remember you liked the Bulls against the Pistons so much in the first game of the season is because Cunningham wasn't playing. I mean, that was one of the major factors. Yep. This is not a 10-win team with this roster. They're bad, but like this is not some historically bad team. Jeremy Grant is a decent player. Isaiah Stewart maybe is a decent player. Kelly Olynyk, I don't know. Like there are competent NBA players on this roster. I would say that removing Giannis, the Pistons are better than the rest of what's active for the Bucks tonight. So then the question is, like, how much is Giannis worth? I mean, it's enough for me where I think the Bucks should be favored, even on the road, even though the rest of their team is total garbage besides Giannis. But they shouldn't be favored by this much. And like, I think Pistons money line is in play. I think Pistons plus 4.5 is a pretty good bet. It's just like you look at the names of these two teams and like, why are the Bucks favored? I mean, most people would say, why are the Bucks only favored?
Well, you said why they're favored. It's Giannis. Giannis is why they're favored. The best player on the floor by a mile.
But I think that's why I'm not betting. Why are they only favored? Yeah.
The reason I'm not betting the game is because you just laid out a fair and competent case for the Pistons, both on the spread and money line. But at the same time, it's the Pistons at not a very big number. So I'm just going to stay away. The way that NBA has been going, the Pistons win this game.
Pistons are 2-5 against the spread this year.
Yeah, it's just I think Cunningham is a difference maker. I think, and also part of the reason they're getting more points than I think they deserve to be getting is because they're 2-5 against the spread. Like, we can get into this, but a lot of why I care about against the spread records is because when a team is bad against the spread, they tend to be undervalued on future spreads because people will bet based on the ATS records to that point. So I know this is what Julian's looking at a lot for Heat Mavericks, and I don't necessarily disagree with him on the game. I think a lot of what we're looking at there depends on Bam Adebayo. But like, to me, the Heat you're buying high if you're buying into the Heat. And it's like, maybe the line is a little too low right now because of the uncertainty around Bam. So like, if you got that number early and then Bam ends up in, it could still be a good bet. But I think, like the Pistons have been bad, so they're getting undervalued. I think the Heat have been really good, and they probably look a little bit overvalued. The Mavericks, to me, would be a really appealing spot if Bam doesn't play. Like, I think we saw the Heat blow out the Grizzlies without him the other night, and like, that is not something we can expect to. Like, Dwayne Dedmon is not good. He's an absolute lock button fantasy play if he's starting again for like close to the minimum, but he's not. Like, the drop off from Bam Adebayo to Dwayne Dedmon is very large. So that's an injury dependent situation. But like, I'm not reading too much into the fact that the Heat have started so strong.
So Bam's questionable and Kristaps Porzingis is out tonight with his injury. Miami, like Utah, who is also on this slate, one of the better teams against the spread at 5-1. Julian, you are leaning earlier in the day to Miami -2 at -110. And you pointed out Dallas's struggles against the spread. Also, you like Miami in the first quarter on the money line because Dallas has struggled in the opening frame. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so Miami's been really good against the spread overall. They're covering by 13.8 points per game. But if I do anything tonight, it's probably going to be the Heat first quarter, and it'll be if Bam plays. So, when we get that alert from DK Live, Bam Adebayo playing, I'll probably throw something up on Twitter with the analysis to my article saying that I'm going in on Heat first quarter. And the reason I want to go first quarter is I do get into some of these trends. We have 2 weeks of data now. The NBA tipped off 2 weeks ago tonight. Glash, you vividly remember Knicks' first half last year.
Yeah, right.
That was a cash cow for a while. And I just like that the spread for a game doesn't necessarily take into account how teams start games, whether it be first quarter or first half. There are teams that play better earlier in games versus later in games. The Heat so far have been a great early game team. They're 5-1, same as the full game, 5-1 against the first quarter spread. But that's the reason they're winning these games, is because they're like getting out to massive leads. They're covering. This isn't winning by. This is covering first quarters by 10.8 points per game on average. And then you have Dallas. It helps that they're on the flip side of this, 1-5 first quarter ATS. They've been failing to cover first quarter spreads by an average of 3.7 points. So I get that this is all going to create larger numbers, like Matt said, against the spread and kind of even out at some point. But when a game is 2, that means that you just kind of have to make the first quarter a certain number. So for me, if Bam plays, I think that the Heat are going to keep getting off to these strong starts against a team that gets off to a slow start. So I'll continue doing that. The Heat have been fine on the road too, so no concern there for me.
Meiselman, don't you like this spot too? Because Miami's a pretty good defensive team. With Porzingis out, you can basically hone in on Luka and prevent him from being the playmaker that he normally is.
Well, part of the reason that I have a little more faith in Dallas here is because I don't actually think Porzingis is all that good. Like, I just don't think it's that big of a deal.
I will say I don't care at all about Porzingis' status. Like, if I'm going to bet.
Okay.
Yeah, he matters a little, but like he's not close to an all-star caliber player anymore, at least.
Not the same height. Right.
Yeah. To Julian's point, though, on the first quarter, like, I do think it makes sense that Dallas wouldn't be a team that plays great in the first quarter, because just the way the rotation works, where Luka, I think it's very similar to how Giannis plays, where he'll play like 5 or 6 minutes and then sit out the remainder of the quarter and then play the whole second quarter. And point spreads will just treat every quarter as though it's the same. And yeah, based on like the substitution patterns of certain teams, it actually can be kind of different. So maybe that is like part of what's going on there. Truthfully, like, I just don't, like, that is just not my area of expertise. Like, I just don't know about this stuff all that much. But if there is an explanation for like, why does Dallas start slow, it could be just because Luka is only on the court for half of the first quarter. And like, that's actually a really big deal because most of the rest of the Dallas roster is not that good. But for the game overall,
real quick, Matt, rotations, like, as seasons get going now and new teams have new rotations are a huge part of, not necessarily the half, because you generally replicate your first half and second half rotation, but the first quarter ones, like you just mentioned, definitely rotations come into play. Like, if you're going to be a team where just, if you're a one-star team, like you said, with Dallas, with Porzingis off the floor, and you have a guy like Doncic that plays 6-7 minutes in the first quarter and then comes off for the finish, versus a team like Miami that's going to finish the quarter with like 2 of the 3 of Butler, Adebayo, and Lowry on the floor. Like, those are the quarters that I'm looking at as the season goes on. We're not totally there yet, but like, those are awesome spots when you get better players on the floor, or a guy that comes off the floor in the middle and comes back to finish the quarter when other guys are off the floor, gets you a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, so I actually do like the quarter angles more than the half angles for that sort of stuff. And I do think Jimmy Butler generally plays the first 12 minutes of every game.
Yep.
So like, that could explain why it works well for the Heat too. Just, this is a little bit of a dated example, but when Lou Williams was on the Clippers, he basically didn't play in the first quarter and then would play the whole second quarter. And because of just like the way he plays, drawing fouls with the former foul rules where he could just get to the line within 7 seconds of the shot clock and play no defense. Like, I think it probably would have been profitable to just bet the second quarter overs and just like plan for that, because like the players on the court are that. Yeah. So let's go back.
Where were you with this 3 years ago?
Well, I don't know if the results were good. I guess we could check, but we don't need to, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now. Probably, yeah, it would just make us upset that we missed out on this great opportunity. Although Lou Williams he's still in the NBA, so maybe we could try this somewhere else. But yeah, I think it's worth figuring out the reasons at least why these trends might exist rather than just like, here's a trend. I don't know why it's happening, but like there must be something there. And I do think, Julian, like you do a pretty good job with that, like explaining why the trend might actually be real.
I'm wrong a lot too.
Middle game of this 5-game slate. We'll get to the other 2 games. It's only a 5-game slate tonight in the NBA. We will also discuss some NFL look-ahead stuff for Week 9. Maybe talk Thursday night. A lack of movement on this trade deadline day. 4:00 today, the NFL trade deadline. Am I missing something here with Kings and Jazz? This has the highest total tonight at 222. It was at 222.5 earlier. Both teams are not good to the over. They are combined 3-9. And looking at some of the 3-point data, just using threes as an example, like they both defend the 3 well. They don't shoot the 3 well. Julian, what's any analysis here on as why the total here is the highest and why it is so high?
I mean, the Kings have a reputation of getting out and running. They have all those guards. They essentially have 3 point guards that they've drafted recently. So they have a reputation of putting up some points, not playing as much defense. I think that's changed a little bit this season. And Utah was a team that got up and down and shot a lot of threes and kind of got away from their defensive and under reputation last year. I don't necessarily have a take on the total here, but I have a take on totals in the NBA in general.
Please.
Like, we're looking at a slate here with the highest number of 222. And those other ones are way down there. So like these unders in the NBA, as of a week ago, I haven't updated anything, but as of a week ago, 6 days ago, unders were hitting 60% in the NBA. And since then, there was one night where the overs won, and the overs went 5 and 4. Now numbers are getting adjusted. Like games were going under by like over 4 points per game on average. And the reason why, of course, teams that are going under the most, Nets, Hawks, Harden, Trae Young, guys that get to the free throw line all the time. We're not getting that as much. We're getting a few less free throws per game. So I think it's just hitting me now, like looking at the board, highest total on the board, 222. I think we're adjusting. The numbers are being adjusted. And we're going to see lower totals moving forward because of the basically 60% under trend to start the season.
They're not getting those fouls they normally get, right? Those like lean in. That's an adjustment by the officials this year. They're not getting that lean in.
The refs are letting more go. It's turning possessions into either missed shots or turnovers that used to be 2 or 3 free throws.
Yep.
And we're seeing less points.
Slows the game down, more trips to the line, etc. It's a great point. Great point. Any thoughts on Rockets Lakers? I thought this was interesting because the Lakers did win by 10 the other night at Staples Center. They are playing here again. Lakers are a 10-point favorite, just like the other night. They won by 10. It's game 1 of a series, which was the other night. The team that lost game 1 of one of these series last year with the COVID schedule was 27, 14, and 12. That's a 65 win percentage. And the Lakers win differential through 7 games. I'm not sure what to make of this team. We can certainly go into DFS with this team too. Meiselman, I know we've discussed this on this show. When LeBron, who is questionable, Davis is probable, and Westbrook, when they all play, I just still don't get how it all fits. Julian, do you have a thought on the Lakers?
I think the Lakers are figuring it out, and they have a much better chance of figuring it out than, a team like, say, the Celtics right now, who are crashing and burning.
We don't talk about them either.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about them either.
The Celtics were the sharp side last night. I stayed away because I thought they might be gutless frauds, and it wound up that they're gutless frauds.
And I told you.
You should have told me earlier in the day.
I told Julian to stop betting on the Celtics, and
I didn't bet on the Celtics last night. I didn't.
Oh boy.
That was my first time in on the Celtics this year. It wasn't a fun experience.
I had them in Washington on Saturday night. I had a lot of fun.
Oh man.
Anyway.
God, what am I saying? The Lakers. We're talking about the Lakers.
Figuring it out.
That rabbit hole. The Lakers have won with LeBron and Anthony Davis. Like, they've done this. They have LeBron. They just have to figure out how to incorporate Westbrook, who's a very ball-dominant player that you have to mix in with LeBron. Carmelo should work fine, in my opinion.
It's been great.
Rondo still in there. Like, they just have so much talent, so many guys, and LeBron as kind of the linchpin of it all. Like, their slow start is completely meaningless to me. They're going to rest LeBron and Anthony. LeBron already got plenty of nights off. They're going to rest LeBron and Anthony Davis plenty, and maybe let Westbrook have some big nights to himself where he'll be a great DFS play, a great player prop guy to back. But yeah, I have no worries about the Lakers. I know, and it is a good spot for the Rockets, like you're saying. And do the Lakers care that much about this game? I don't know. I'm just not getting behind Houston for the same reasons I'm not getting behind the Pistons. The underdogs might both be the plays in those games, to be honest. I'm just not getting involved tonight.
I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, but also don't the Lakers, didn't they learn their lesson that they don't want to be in any play-in tournament scenario again? Like
that too. I don't think they're going to be bad enough to. I think they're going to stay healthy. They're going to rest guys to stay healthy. So if you get hurt, you can fall into that play-in range.
Okay.
I think that they have enough bodies, enough depth to manage it, stay healthy, and go from there.
All right, that's fair. I mean, the Blazers aren't off to a good start. Sorry, bringing them up here. Suns, Clippers with no Kawhi. Like there might be enough opportunities for the Lakers to like still be where they are right now, 4th place in the West, because everyone else is like kind of dropping off in the Western Conference. So maybe to Julian's point, Meiselman, they can manage it in such a way where they get one guy out, play 2 every night, and be fine. Do we have DFS thoughts? I mean, I brought up Giannis against the Pistons, but you guys made arguments that it's just Giannis. Maybe the value, and Meiselman, you said it, the roster construction of Milwaukee is poor. It's not a good roster. So maybe you don't see value in Milwaukee. And what else do you think for the DFS side?
So a couple things quickly on the Lakers situation.
Yeah.
Like, I think they have a good chance to wind up in the play-in game. And part of it is because they're going to rest LeBron and Davis. And like, they don't have good players after that. Like, I just don't think Westbrook is that helpful in terms of winning basketball games. And yeah, like if their players aren't getting hurt, it's because they're resting. And if they're resting, they're going to lose a lot of games while this is happening. The Lakers have actually started the year with an insanely easy schedule, and they lost. Yeah. People may not have seen this game. They were winning by 26 points against the Oklahoma City Thunder and lost the game in regulation. And Carmelo Anthony and Russell Westbrook looked like absolutely abysmal. I get that like they've looked good at other times, but this is going to be a thing where there are just games where like these guys are just super inefficient and they lose to teams that they shouldn't otherwise lose to. For tonight though, like I'm not that optimistic in the Rockets because they're on the road. I guess it does help, I think, that they don't have to travel on the road. They're already there, so that probably does help a bit. But they do have 2 questionable players that are fairly important, and this is like I think sneaky relevant for DFS. Daniel Tice and Jason Tate are both questionable. Yep. If both of those guys, or maybe just one, but especially if both are out, that could open up a ton of minutes for like players that honestly, it's like hard to think of who that would even be.
Sengun, KJ Martin.
Right? Yeah. Are we saying that right? Shengun? I think that.
Sengun.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I know his name. I lost a lot of money on his draft prop.
But so you're gonna win it back tonight when you play him as the late swap M for Daniel Tice when he gets ruled out.
Perfect.
Right?
He owes me a lot.
Yeah. He is center only, so like that's going to make for a difficult situation, especially if like JaVale McGee is an appealing late center option. But this is part of the reason I like my favorite thing to do for DFS tonight is to save a center or utility slot for someone cheap for the late window, because I think that we are likely to get at least McGee or Shengun as like the value play, who no one will have because a lot of these slots are going to be occupied by these early games. And these 2 games, the Suns game and the Rockets game, start so far after lock that most likely you've filled up the majority of your roster or you've tuned out and you're not even checking anymore. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. If Jason Tate's out, then I think all of the wing players on the Rockets become more appealing. Like, sure, we could see KJ Martin step into the rotation, but even for players that are already in the rotation, there's just more usage, more minute security. I keep touting Kevin Porter Jr. like he's going to have a good game eventually. He just does so much. He's just been so inefficient. It's very annoying. But like I think the ceiling game is lurking there. He did have 47 fantasy points against the Thunder a few games ago. I think that's certainly not out of the question against a Lakers team that is mediocre at best defensively, and then especially if Tate's out and more minutes and usage are there for him. So I basically for this DFS slate, I'll tie it back to Milwaukee. I want to avoid a lot of these, what I think will be chalk Bucks value plays, so that I can use those lineup spots to fill in Rockets and Suns players if we get this late news.
Okay. And what about the stud to consider for tonight? Giannis, Luka, and then it's the 3 Lakers: LeBron, Westbrook, Davis, as far as most expensive.
Yeah, if there's chalk that I want to play tonight that I'm comfortable just saying like he's 40-50% owned, but whatever, it's worth it, that guy's Giannis. Like I think that his probability of success, especially because I think this game most likely stays close. Like I'm not really worried about the Pistons getting blown out against Milwaukee's backups essentially around Giannis. And then if they do get blown out, it's probably because Giannis was unbelievably good through 3 quarters. So like I think he's the hardest guy to fade on this slate. I'd much rather fade like if Jordan Nwora is going to be popular or Bobby Portis. Like Portis was really efficient in very limited minutes last game. Like there are a number of ways that doesn't work out. So I think I'd rather just plan ahead and try to use cheaper players late. And yeah, I think Giannis is probably the stud you want. I don't have an issue with Luka the Lakers guys are more contrarian plays because with all 3 of them there, it's just hard. But I think Giannis is a good play, even if he's popular.
You have a DFS thought, Julian? Do you still cover DFS?
Not much. I remember the days that I used to write the NBA cheat sheet. I'm mostly on the sportsbook side, but so is Matt, and he's giving out DFS takes.
That's a no.
I'm slowly shifting over, though. I've got like 50-50 at this point.
So
we miss you.
It's hard not to like Giannis on this slate against the Pistons with nobody else playing. I think it's fine chalk to eat, and like you said, the 3 Lakers guys are all in, so it's hard to go somewhere else there. I guess my thought is, and this is from somebody who's stepped away a little bit more from DFS. We're not talking at all about the highest game on the slate, which is that Jazz Kings game, and getting some exposure there. So I would say, can it somehow be contrarian to dive into that game and spend some money there when we're talking? Basically, every other game has superstars to a degree, and this one I guess doesn't. Donovan Mitchell is pretty good, and you see right there he's only $8,800 in what appears to be a good matchup on paper. Getting some exposure somewhere in this game makes sense to me. I just don't know exactly where I would want to get it.
Right. Yeah. The problem for me is that the 2 players I would probably like the most here are Rudy Gober and Rashawn Holmes. I think they're just like the 2 most underpriced guys on either of these teams.
Holmes has been awesome. I was on some.
You think Holmes is underpriced? His number keeps going up. Probably deserving though.
Well, it's just that like he has so much upside if he doesn't get in foul trouble. I also think this matchup is probably not like Rudy Gobert is valuable not for his offense. Holmes should be able to like at least take it easy, not relax on defense, but focus on rebounding. Like, he doesn't really have to guard Gobert's offense so much.
Right.
He's guarding pick and rolls. He's not guarding one-on-one. Like maybe that helps to keep him out of foul trouble. But yeah, like you look at the box score, like, he's had some huge games. But the problem is both those guys are centers, and if you want to try to play Şengün or JaVale McGee, like it just doesn't really fit with that kind of idea that I'm going for. So it's not that I don't like them. It's just, it doesn't really make as much sense for this slate, but I do think Mitchell's a good play, and he probably, it's tough to figure out. Like the one guy I would expect to be really contrarian from this game is De'Aaron Fox. It's definitely a perceived bad matchup against the Jazz. And it is, I guess, in terms of like their defensive proficiency, but this game should have one of the faster paces of the night. So like, I don't think it's that terrible of a spot for Fox. So like, if I want the sneaky play, maybe you're fading Giannis and you hope that it's just like, I don't know, maybe the Pistons blow out the Bucks. I can't really even say that with a straight face, but you could fit Fox in a lineup that has Giannis and then just stay away from
the thing with Fox. If you like look at him there, he hasn't even had a huge game yet where he's really worth his value, and his salary's gone up kind of. It's as high as it's been. Right. He didn't do well the last time against Utah. You see it right there on the game log. I mentioned his name, but he is very contrarian. Just like even if he has a solid game, we don't see any 40-point DraftKings efforts in there, and 40 points doesn't even get you what you want.
Right. I'd be shocked to see him more than
his only one was against Portland
in any contest. He's not, if he hits double digit, like I'd bet a lot against him being double digit owned in any tournament.
All right. Let's say we go to the NFL now, because I think we've hammered the you know what, out of this 5-game NBA
Let's
slate.
I'm going to make one last point. I think it's viable to put JaVale McGee into your lineups regardless of Ayton's status, and then just ride it out with McGee even if Ayton plays. Because one, if Ayton plays, you're much more likely to have a blowout. McGee would probably play garbage time. And then two, Ayton may not be 100%, and you could just get extra McGee minutes that way. So like JaVale McGee's my guy tonight. I kind of just am happy with him, like no matter what happens late. Because if you play for the late news and it doesn't happen, you're just kind of stuck. I don't think it's a big deal to end up with McGee. So that's kind of just my final thoughts on NBA.
So you're saying like so maybe Giannis as your center, and then have McGee as what you were talking about earlier, having the big guy in the utility spot.
Yeah, or maybe even play like Giannis at power forward, Christian Wood at center, and McGee at the utility. And then you've got your center and your utility are late players, and you can kind of maneuver that if you need to.
Sounds good. All right, good stuff. So hopefully that was useful for your NBA betting and DFS needs for this evening. We do have NFL to get to. A very quiet day on the trade front in the National Football League. The trade deadline was at 4:00. So we found out in the last couple of minutes here that Deshaun Jackson has been waived. That makes sense. Who's giving up an asset for Deshaun Jackson? It was rumored that the Rams were going to waive him anyway. What were they going to get, a 7th-round pick or something for him? So that makes sense. But bigger names like Brandon Cooks, as far as DFS and offensive players that we like to focus on here at DraftKings, he didn't move. OBJ was rumored to go to the Saints. There was a report coming out there that they were trying to figure something out. And that's not going well between him and Baker and in that locker room. So I guess we have to make something out of nothing here. Nothing happens. Brandon Cooks must be miserable staying in Houston. And I'm curious as to how OBJ staying in Cleveland affects them maybe this week on the road in a bounce back spot that they kind of need the game against the Cincinnati team that just got embarrassed by the Jets. What do we make of the lack of movement today with those? I think those two players are the story today, Brandon Cooks and Odell Beckham Jr. Anyone?
I think it tells a lot about like the quality of the market. Like I don't really know that Odell Beckham is a difference maker anymore at this point. Like I guess there's so much talent there that he could be great again, but he just hasn't been. So like, for instance, if he was traded to, let's say, the Saints, like I don't even think the point spread for that game would have moved very much. Cooks, I think, is a different story. I think he is a much more productive receiver at this point in his career. So it is it's surprising that he wasn't moved, but I guess like we never really know what's going on behind the scenes. I'm surprised that Brandon Cooks wasn't traded. Not sure like where it would have made the most sense for him to go. But as far as this week, like the Browns and Bengals game is is a mess. Like Baker Mayfield's health is a question mark. And I think like I would probably, if we knew that Mayfield was healthy and this was the line, I think this would be a great spot for the Browns. Like I think the Bengals, so we actually, I forget what show it was, but like 4 weeks ago, I was talking about how the Bengals were undervalued, and they went from undervalued to overvalued so fast after their win against the Ravens. Like
right. They were 6.5. They were 6.5 point dogs.
Yeah. And they won that game, and it was like, now they're a Super Bowl contender. And it's like, well, I don't think so. And I still didn't bet the Jets against them because like, I think the Jets are that bad, and maybe that was a mistake, but I just like the idea that the Bengals became this superpower team just by this one win against the Ravens.
Yeah.
It just never made sense. And the two prior games, they had beaten Jacksonville, they'd beaten Detroit. Like these weren't big wins or anything.
And they hung in there with Green Bay.
Right. They
should have with Green Bay. They
and
upset
won in
Minnesota
overtime
to start the season, but
right.
Yeah.
The Vikings stink.
But hanging in there with Green Bay is what I think started the train of them being legit. And then, of course, I thought going into the Baltimore game, like they might fall on their faces here. And they didn't. Yeah. They won the game. They dominated the game. And I think that's when the overvaluing started to happen.
Yeah. So, like, they're probably an average team overall if you look at the complete picture. But I think so are the Browns. And the Browns might be – I think the Browns probably have a little bit better of a defense. It's just if Mayfield's not 100% and he's playing through this shoulder injury – even though it's his non-throwing shoulder, like that's hampering him at least to some extent. They did not look good offensively against the Steelers. So yeah, I don't really know what to make of that one.
Spooky. The game we just started talking about that game and it's been taken down off the DK Sportsbook.
What just happened? Is that us or is that news? Or?
I don't know. It's not there anymore.
Well, there was just news, but it's nothing related to football. Embiid's going to play tomorrow, it sounds like, which is kind of surprising to me. And Giannis is still probable tie, so nothing that significant. The game I liked the most on this NFL slate, it's already moved a couple points, so I'm not sure if I like it anymore, but the Eagles open +3. And like I've been saying this for weeks, I don't think the Chargers are good. I think that they played an overrated Chiefs team who we now are seeing is not that good of a team. And like that was their win. That was the win that like solidified them as like, look how good the Chargers are. They're like, okay. I mean, whatever. They might even be slightly below average. If you look at let's just go by DVOA just quickly. They're slightly above average, both offense and defense, and they are dead last by a large margin in special teams. And maybe that's like what people don't realize. Like the Patriots won that game essentially from their punt returns. Just like the field position battle was so extreme. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is a thing. Like New England's always good on special teams. You guys would know better than I would.
There's 3 phases of the game, Matt.
Yeah, and the Chargers are good. The Chargers are average at 2 and horrible at the other one. So this is not that exciting of a team to me, even though Justin Herbert is like a promising young quarterback. So yeah, like I don't know that the Eagles win because I don't think the Eagles are much of anything, but +3 was way too high of a line. +1 is probably very close to fair. And then what's still appealing to me, like even without Henry Ruggs now, I think the Raiders are still the team that should be favored in the AFC West. Like the Chargers are right now, and the Raiders are actually behind the Chiefs. And I think the Raiders deserve to be the favorites there.
That I can't bring myself to bet the Eagles even after that big win against the Lions. I just don't trust the Eagles over 50.
What if I was giving you those 3 points that you no longer can get?
Sure. If you want to give me spreads I can't get, I'll probably take most of them. I like over. I like over in that game. I think Philly should be able to put up points against that bad Chargers defense, get good field position off of special teams, like you said. And I don't think the Eagles defense is anything special. I think Herbert should still be able to, kind of bounce back spot, try and put up some points here. We've seen him put up big points against the Browns. We saw him fall on his face against the Ravens, but I think against the Eagles probably puts up more points. I would lean to the over in that one, but that's not something I've gotten around to yet.
What do you got for us, Julian, as far as leans? Teasers, right?
I put out my best bets article today. I'm getting out early after falling on my face last week. I did get to the Patriots at -3. They're now at -3.5. You got to be a little careful here, overvaluing them off of 2 consecutive wins now.
Hold on, real quick. Didn't they open? Wasn't it 2.5 like yesterday or the day before?
I think it was 3 as soon as it reopened. It was 1.5.
Okay, I'm only bringing that up because you hope maybe you get it at that number, but like you said, you got to be careful.
Yeah, you would have needed it before Sam Darnold's injury. I think that's right. Like the initial move 1.5 to 3 was Darnold, and then I think the 3 to 4 is just like this line is still bad. Like Julian probably got in like at the earliest time you could have without predicting the future on Darnold getting hurt again.
Okay,
I got it on Monday morning at 3. I don't hate 3.5. Good defenses, both sides. Like Carolina's defense is improving, so I don't think it's going to be easy on Mac Jones in that offense. But I just think they're going to have more in this game, whether it's a concussed Sam Darnold or a XFL legend PJ Walker. You got a New England defense that's kind of rebounding a little bit and finding itself. Going up against the Panthers offense, it just hasn't been good. So I don't mind the under here, honestly, at 41, but I prefer playing the Patriots. This is going to be like the Panthers won a 19-13 game last week. I think this is going to be more of like a New England 19-13 type of win.
All right. Sounds good. Good stuff.
We'll go through the teasers. We got a minute.
Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on Thursday, that gross game, because I want Julian to get his victory lap in on Mike White.
Mike White was my hot take on the sweat on Sunday, that he would have the best game of any Jet quarterback all season.
I know.
He throws for 400 yards, multiple touchdowns. He wins that guy. Somebody bet Mike White to lead the NFL in passing yards that week.
I saw it.
He won $125,000.
Wow.
What an absolute lunatic. I would never want to trust that guy's judgment. But congrats to him. But my take cost me money. Like I had some Bengals bets in there. Just live bets and to win the game. Like it cost me money. But yeah, the Rams are my favorite teaser piece. Tennessee's coming off the highs of smoking the Chiefs. The Colts in overtime on the road. Now they got to go out to LA for Sunday Night Football. Really good defense. No first game without Derrick Henry, teasing them down to 1.5. This is a gross game. You're laying a touchdown almost with a 1-win team, but Miami's going to beat Houston. Houston just sold off some pieces, but Houston, until they scored 22 points in the fourth quarter against the Rams to backdoor that game, they scored 8 points in 10 quarters. They got shut out the last quarter against the Patriots, scored a 5 in a game, scored a 3 in a game, and then went 3 quarters against the Rams scoreless. That's 8 points in 10 quarters. They're not going to win in Miami. It's kind of gross, but you can tease them down with Miami. So the Ravens aren't necessarily a teaser piece. It's all about the value here. So they're laying the 6. If you tease it, it's -120. The last time I looked, if you money line parlayed Rams and Ravens, it was -118. Oh, it's -125 now. So whatever way you want to do it. But yeah, I'm trying not to overreact to how bad Kirk Cousins was on Sunday Night Football. But he's not going into Baltimore and getting the win. And this is mostly backing Baltimore to bounce back. Baltimore
Ravens off a bye.
Awful loss to Cincy. You got the bye to think about it.
Yep.
You're at home against Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. Harbaugh's been good off the bye. Baltimore's winning that game. So those are my 3 square winners for you. Put them together however you would like. And I'm due for some winners. So I'm going to hope these 3 teams win.
All righty. Good stuff. We got to get going. Thank you all for tuning in to the Slate. We join you in the 5 o'clock hour every weekday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And then we take you up until 6 o'clock. Tomorrow, golf and NFL discussion with Emerson, Reed, and Jeff. They will join you on YouTube, Twitch, and the Twitter stream. For Julian Edlow, you can find him at Julian Edlow on Twitter?
Yeah, tough one.
Okay, easy. At Julian Edlow. You can also follow the Unreasonable Odds podcast. That's where you can find Julian. And DraftKings Sportsbook content specialist, Matt Meiselman. I just love saying his title.
You say it in a much more exciting way every single time. It's been gradually increasing a lot.
I enjoy it. He's at Preaching Sense. Terrific follows for all things NBA as it pertains to our discussion. Also the NFL. Don't follow me. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks to Eamon and Tom as well for tuning into the Slate and in helping us here on the Slate tonight. We will hopefully catch you all tomorrow, and be sure to watch The Sweat at 11 a.m. Good night.